Hey y'all, welcome back to Movement Link. So I want to spend a few minutes here today talking about linking deadlifts together and some of the common pitfalls we see people fall into, and then why we might actually do link deadlifts that way, why we might do that depending on what else we're having to do. So we'll get into that piece kind of later. So let's just start with linking deadlifts together and what we should be thinking about and why this common mistake is so common and kind of why it's such a detriment. So the first thing we want to think about is in the deadlift, we want to be standing really close to the bar, so it's as close to our frontal plane, or so we just have nice balance and leverage on the bar. From there, we always like to think of everything as a squat, a push-up, and a jump. So I like to think of the deadlift to get as much skill transfer as possible. And different people have different size body parts and all these different things, and so we're going to have different mobility and different leverages. So this is just a starting point, but in general we want to think about it having like a 45-degree angle. It looks just like my jump. From there, we're just going to squat down into the bar and we can get tight. So in general, that's going to be the start of the deadlift position. So now I'm going to say something that's just so obvious. When we're linking deadlifts, we need to be able to get back into that start position. So the simple way of doing it is when we get back down there, create that jumping angle, squat down. You can get a little tighter down there, but then we're just going to deadlift it up. And then to get back down on that rep, we're going to create that jumping back angle. This also gets the knees out of the way. So now when I squat down to the bottom of that deadlift, I can maintain good positions. I can hit that setup position consistently, and starting with that jumping position gets our knees back and out of the way. So a lot of benefits there. So what we see people do as they're linking deadlifts, they go down in a way that's a little bit easier to go down, but then it sets them up in a much tougher position on the way up. So what I'm talking about is, as we see people do deadlifts, they bend over and then they just stay bent over. It's much easier to get to the ground, but now you're pulling out of position and you're doing more of a stiff-legged deadlift, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with stiff-legged deadlifts, but if in the programming we're looking for stiff-legged deadlifts, we're going to program stiff-legged deadlifts. So the mistake people are making is they're coming down and they're taking the easy way down. So instead of putting that tiny bit extra effort and attention to detail of kind of jumping position, squat into it, they start coming down, they're just like fall to the ground, and then they're out of position on the way up. So what we always want to do is keep in mind we want to control why we're doing what we're doing. So jumping position, squatting down, and that's just going to put us in that perfect setup position. I'll show you just a few more reps here. They're not slower, they just take a little bit of practice. So now what we have is that start position is going to use a nice balance of butt, hamstring, and quad. So now we might be in the middle of a testing workout or a competition or a benchmark or something like that, where we're trying to get the best score possible. And then we're trying to work off of standards. Bar touches the ground, stand all the way up with it. Deadlifts might be mixed with something that uses a ton of quad. So we might want to bias the hamstrings. And we know to bias the hamstring, we're going to do a little more of a stiff-legged deadlift. So that's just something to consider. Just because somebody is linking deadlifts together, staying a little more over it, doesn't necessarily mean they're doing it wrong, okay? But if they're just doing that every single time, it probably means they're not taking that extra little bit of effort to think about why and how to link all these movements together, so we get maximal carryover, one, to the program you're following, but also out into the real world. But also we want to have these variations of all of our exercises, and we want to know, how can we target the hamstrings, how can we target the glutes, how can we target the quads, how do we switch up which muscle groups we're using in case we're doing something like thrusters and deadlifts or box jumps or cleans, and doing things that use a lot of quad or lunges. How do we get the deadlifts into the hamstrings? Now we would kind of bend over it more. So long story short here, just to kind of summarize it, what we're looking for is for you to be able to get into whatever setup position that you're deciding is best for your workout in the moment. And in general, it's probably going to be creating that jumping angle and just getting used to deadlifting and not getting lazy on the way down, because that's going to set you up in a rough position. But if you're choosing to do more of a stiff-legged deadlift for reasons that might have to do with the workout, that's perfectly fine. Just I want you to know why you're doing it and why you would choose one. And I don't want you just to go stiff-legged deadlifts all the time, because it's easier to get down to the ground, because it's putting us out of position. It's actually changing the exercise a little bit. Hope this helps. Talk to y'all soon.